What happens when a Hollywood legend decides she's had enough of being interrupted, and finally talks back to one of daytime television's most outspoken hosts? The result is one of the most brutal verbal takedowns in The View's history, on our moment where Jane Fonda absolutely destroyed Joy Behar, leaving the studio in stunned silence. By the end of the clash, Joy looked like she wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. It began like an ordinary Tuesday morning on The View. Cameras rolled, the audience settled, and the hosts prepared to welcome their guest, the iconic Jane Fonda. At 86 years old, Fonda had experienced everything Hollywood and activism could throw at her. She stepped onto the set to roaring applause. Elegant in a crisp white blazer and styled silver hair, carrying herself with the confidence of someone who has spent 6 decades under bright lights. She greeted Whoopi Goldberg warmly and settled into her chair, completely unaware of the confrontation about to unfold. Jane had barely gotten comfortable when Joy Behar jumped in with her characteristic bluntness. "So Jane, I have to ask you about something that's been bothering me," she began, launching immediately into an accusation about hypocrisy in Fonda's climate activism. Joy questioned how someone who once flew in private jets and lived in large homes could lecture regular people about sacrifices. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The other hosts exchanged uneasy glances. JaneFonda.com, but clearly taken aback by the hostility, acknowledged her past, emphasized the changes she'd made to reduce her carbon footprint, and highlighted her environmental work. But Joy pushed harder, raising her voice and accusing Fonda of expecting the public to forget about her lavish lifestyle. That's when the tension snapped. Jane's expression sharpened, the fire in her eyes unmistakable. "Not sure what you're trying to accomplish here," she said evenly. "Are you interviewing me about my work, or are you trying to create drama for your show? Because if it's the latter, you're going about it the wrong way." Joy turned red, insisting she was just being honest. Jane cut her off, her voice firm. "No, Joy, you're being rude and confrontational. There's a difference between honest journalism and what you're doing right now." The entire panel fell silent. Sunny Hostin looked ready to intervene. Sarah N. stared at her notes. Whoopi's expression froze as she prepared to jump in if things spiraled. Feeling cornered. Joy tried to defend herself by claiming The View doesn't do softball interviews. That was the breaking point. Jane sat up straighter, her voice now slicing through the air. "You call that journalism? You ambushed me with poorly researched accusations. That's not tough journalism. That's tabloid sensationalism." Joy attempted to respond, but Jane continued, listing the actual changes she had made. Living in a smaller home, ending private jet travel, donating millions to environmental causes. "If you'd done even basic research," she said, "you would already know that." The room was dead silent. Joy, shaken, tried to regain control with a weak defense about viewers deserving to know. Jane leaned back, a faint, victorious smile forming. "What viewers deserve," she said, "is honesty and respect, not cheap shots." Joy, "What viewers deserve is honest, respectful dialogue, not whatever this performance is supposed to be." The word performance hit Joy like a slap. Her face strained from red to pale in seconds. She glanced around the table, searching for backup from her co-hosts, but every one of them avoided eye contact, leaving her alone to face Jane Fonda's rising fury. "I don't know what you're implying," Joy said, her voice tightening and pitching upward. "I'm not implying anything," Jane replied coolly. "I'm stating it directly. You're performing. You're trying to manufacture conflict where none needs to exist. And frankly, it's beneath both of us." Joy was rattled. She had walked into this interview believing she could intimidate the Hollywood icon. But instead, she was being taken apart piece by piece by someone who'd spent a lifetime dealing with opponents far tougher than a daytime talk show host. Look. Jane, Joy tried again. I'm just trying to hold you accountable for your actions. Jane let out a short laugh, cold, dismissive. Hold me accountable. Joy, you're a talk show host, not a prosecutor. And even if you were, you'd need to have your facts straight before throwing around accusations. The tension in the studio thickened. Even the crew behind the cameras seemed frozen. The audience didn't dare breathe. The cameras kept rolling as Joy Behar endured one of the harshest on-air dressings down in the show's history. Whoopi Goldberg finally stepped in, sensing the interview was dangerously close to imploding. Maybe we should move on to your new project, Jane. But Joy, desperate and embarrassed, made the worst possible decision. She refused a lifeline. No. Wait, she said, lifting a hand. I think we need to address this properly. Jane, you've made a career out of being controversial. From Vietnam to your political activism, you've never shied away from stirring the pot. So why are you suddenly so sensitive when someone questions you? The audacity of the statement stunned the room. Jane's expression shifted from irritated to truly angry. Joy had crossed a boundary that was not meant to be crossed. Sensitive. Jane repeated, her voice now dangerously quiet. Joy, you clearly don't understand the difference between being controversial and being ignorant. What you just said proves you have no idea what you're talking about. But Joy, misreading the moment entirely, pushed forward. I'm talking about your anti-war protests, your comments about American soldiers. You can't rewrite history. Silence fell. Even the studio lights felt dimmer. Jane Fonda sat perfectly still before speaking, and when she did, her voice could have cut glass. Joy, I'm going to give you one chance to retract that statement and apologize. What you just said is not only factually deliberately inflammatory and deeply disrespectful to me and to the veterans I've worked with for decades. Joy, flustered and grasping at straws, made another catastrophic mistake. I don't need to apologize for stating facts. Your actions during Vietnam are well documented. Jane slowly rose from her chair, and for a moment it seemed she might walk off the set. Instead, she turned to face Joy directly. Her voice was controlled, but the authority behind it was unmistakable. Facts. Let me give you some facts, Joy. I spent 2 years visiting wounded veterans in hospitals. I've worked with veteran organizations for more than 50 years. I have apologized repeatedly for the pain my actions caused. I have dedicated much of my life to supporting our troops. But you wouldn't know any of that because you didn't bother to research before opening your mouth. Joy sat frozen, her complexion nearly white. She had realized too late that she had stepped into deep waters with no way out. Well, that may be true, she stammered, but the perception is still there. The perception. Jane's eyebrows shot up. Joy, you're not reporting on perception, you're creating it. You're spreading misinformation and then hiding behind the excuse that it's what people think. Sarah N. finally tried to intervene. Maybe we should take a commercial break. Jane lifted her hand. No, we should finish this conversation. Joy started it. Let's see it through. Joy looked like a deer caught in headlights. She had assumed Jane Fonda would be an easy target, an aging actress who might crumble under tough questioning. Instead, she'd awakened a force of nature who was now dismantling her credibility on national television. Joy, Jane continued. You have a platform that reaches millions. With that platform comes responsibility. You can't just throw around accusations and half-truths because you think it makes for good television. Asterisk, I wasn't throwing around accusations. Joy protested weakly. Asterisk, yes, you were, Jane shot back. From the moment I sat down, you've made baseless statements and asked loaded questions. Now you're trying to relitigate history that you clearly don't understand. This isn't journalism, Joy. This is a hit job. Asterisk, the co-hosts looked mortified. Sunny Hostin stared at her hands. Whoopi appeared to be calculating how to end the disaster without making it worse. Sarah looked as if she wanted to vanish. Joy, out of defenses, made one last pathetic attempt. I think you're overreacting, Jane. This is just a normal interview. Jane let out a laugh, sharp, disbelieving. Jane's laugh was pure disbelief. Normal? Joy. In a normal interview, the host prepares. They research their guest. They ask thoughtful questions meant to inform their audience. They listen to the answers and follow up appropriately. She leaned forward slightly. You've done none of that. I did prepare, Joy insisted defensively. No, you didn't, Jane replied without hesitation. If you had, you would know I've spent the last decade making climate documentaries. That I've been arrested multiple times protesting environmental destruction. That I've put real money into renewable energy projects. But instead of asking about any meaningful part of my work, you decided to ambush me with tabloid-level gossip. Asterisk, Joy's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She had no counter-argument because everyone in the studio knew Jane was right. Asterisk, and another thing. Jane continued, her voice steady but gaining force. Your approach isn't just unprofessional, it's lazy. You could have created a fascinating conversation about the intersection of entertainment and activism, about how Hollywood has changed over the decades, about the challenges facing older women in the industry. Instead, you chose to manufacture fake controversy because you think conflict equals good television. Asterisk, the audience was dead silent, some nodding along with Jane's words, while others looked painfully uncomfortable watching. Joy Behar get dismantled so publicly. Asterisk, Joy managed to speak again, but her voice was barely more than a whisper. Jane didn't give her room to escape. Asterisk, no, Joy, she said. Sitting back down but maintaining laser-sharp eye contact, you weren't trying to be insightful. You weren't trying to inform your audience. You were trying to score cheap points at my expense. There's a huge difference. Asterisk, the weight of Jane's words settled over the studio like fog. Joy seemed smaller, deflated. She had come in expecting to expose hypocrisy. You had only exposed her own unpreparedness and unprofessionalism. Asterisk, and let's go one step further. Jane said, unwilling to let the moment pass without finishing the lesson. A way you've conducted this interview says far more about you than it does about me. You've shown your viewers that you're more interested in stirring drama than having meaningful conversations with your guests. Asterisk, Joy tried again to defend herself, but the attempt was feeble. Asterisk, Jane tilted her head slightly, a gesture that was equal parts elegant and devastating. There is a difference between asking tough questions and being rude. Tough questions are researched, relevant, and rooted in respect. What you've been doing is just being combative for the sake of being combative. Asterisk, the silence that followed was suffocating. Joy sat frozen, fully aware she had been outmaneuvered on every front. Asterisk, but Jane Fonda wasn't done. She had handled hostile interviews, abrasive directors, and political firestorms across decades. And she was about to land the finishing blow. Asterisk, you know what the real tragedy is here, Joy? She asked, her voice calm but unyielding. You had an opportunity to have a real conversation with someone who has lived through 7 decades of American history. Someone who has seen the entertainment industry transform. someone who has been on the front lines of social movements. And instead, you wasted everyone's time with this performance. Asterisk's Joy's face was completely drained of color. She looked helplessly to her co-hosts for rescue, but none met her gaze. They had silently agreed she had created this disaster. Alone, and she would have to face it alone. Asterisk, I think maybe we should move on. Joy whispered, her earlier bravado evaporated. Asterisk, double quotes, oh, now you want to move on. Jane arched an eyebrow. After spending 10 minutes making accusations and spreading misinformation, now you want to change the subject. That's very convenient. Asterisk, the audience was riveted. This was no longer an interview gone wrong. It was a masterclass in controlling a hostile conversation. Jane Fonda was dismantling Joy's approach with surgical precision. Asterisk, let me ask you something. Joy, Jane said, leaning forward. When you prepared for this interview, if you prepared at all, what exactly did you hope to accomplish? Did you think you were going to expose some grand hypocrisy? Did you think I would crumble under your questioning? What was your endgame here? Asterisk Joy opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She was entirely cornered by her own approach and by Jane's relentless clarity. Asterisk, because from where I'm sitting, Jane continued, it looks like you invited me here not for a conversation, but to use me as a prop in whatever narrative you had already decided to sell to your viewers. That's not journalism. Joy, that's exploitation. Asterisk, the word exploitation hit like a hammer. Joy's hands were trembling now as she struggled to respond. Asterisk, I never intended to, Joy stammered. But Jane held up a hand, gentle yet firm. Joy, I want you to listen to me.